I approached Excel and said, have you ever done anything like this before? I'm thinking of turning, one of your halls or two of your halls into a huge computer lab, basically. And they said, we haven't really done anything at that scale, but it doesn't mean it can't be achieved. And then, I was speaking to other stakeholders for those that, were supplying the power. And again, they were like, we've never done anything like this.
Hello and welcome to the Test Community Network. My name's Tim Burnett. I hope you're all safe and well. Welcome to this third in our little mini-series looking at higher education and digital assessment and different perspectives from different organisations and different people working in that space. So first episode, if you've not seen it, we had Leslie O'Keefe, and she was talking about her role as a registrar and overseeing exam operations and then kind of the overall kind of exam activity, experiences of bringing your own device, student welfare, which is a significant part, and the changing role of the invigilators in that space and how they're there not just to kind of monitor for cheats, but also to ensure that students are catered for and looked after and nurtured during that quite a stressful process. And she refers to some case law that's coming out at the moment, which has made some big significant changes in there. So I'll show you a clip with that one now. Then I'll show you the Birmingham City University one. So here's me, just a brief clip with me in conversation with Leslie.
When you factor in the number of international students who will have had a whole variety of different experiences before they come, and mature students, I don't think it's really true that old traditional A-level is what everyone came with is actually true anymore. So I think it puts you in a different landscape anyway.
So that was episode 1. Then episode 2, it was Tom and Elliot from Birmingham City University. They've got a hybrid assessment model where they're trying to make it available for students to take their exams either remotely or on campus in their testing facilities. So they talked about that and their award-winning approach on that, but they talked about student literacy in terms of ICT and digital technologies and how they're seeing some emerging trends coming from there, and how they've tried to accommodate that in the way they work. So here's me in conversation with Tom and Elliot. Here's a short clip.
One thing we always notice that we sort of smile about is students will come and sit down into our assessment centre, and by default, obviously the PCs are switched off, but to turn them on, they will tap on the screen of the desktop, which is, again, it's an unfamiliarity with that kind of technology.
So it's a great conversation. So before we start, we're going to share the interview with Lisa in a second. Just as ever, I just want to give you a kind of brief update. So anything you see in here that you like, go to the testcommunity.network. You'll also be able to subscribe on there. Go to testcommunity.network and you'll get an email through once a week, which enables you to kind of really get an in-depth view as to what's going on with the space. There's lots of articles, podcasts, events that are coming up. Just give you a really in-depth feel for what you can do, where you can go, what information is out there for you. In terms of events, what I'm going to do this week, because when this is going out, I'm actually going to be at a conference. So I'm going to run through some of the kind of looking ahead at the moment. So we've got on the 27th, so later on the day this is broadcast, if you're a FAB member, then you can watch a webinar by Turnitin looking at ensuring academic integrity for the age of AI. Now, this is based on some research that's been done, and I think it's a bit of a burning topic, because I was talking to some people this week, and it is a significant thought piece for them whether or not they should be looking at AI plagiarism detection tools. I'm skeptical about them, and I said that to the chap who runs this company, who's got a webinar coming up soon. I'm hoping there'll be a guest on here very near future. This is another AI plagiarism detection tool, and he was in a brief conversation I've had with him, just looking at he comes at it from a different kind of the ethical and fair use of those tools, because it's one of those things, isn't it? Imagine getting accused of using AI when you haven't, then that can be quite a significant piece for it. I'm not entirely sure we can detect it. Anyway, so AO Forum, 30th of April, yours truly will be presenting at that alongside some other fantastic presenters. That's in London if you want to head along to there. Just some other announcements of future events coming up. So CART's Conference on Test Security. Their call for papers is out at the moment, so I think you've got until about 15th of May to check on that one. And they've got the in-person conference, but they also have a virtual conference as well. So if you want to attend that, then you can do. Flip Plus, they've got an annual event in Arnhem. This is a kind of European-based assessment organisation looking at the use of digital assessment in from everything from university through to professional certification. So worth checking that out if you fancy getting involved in that. ICE Exchange is later on in the year. So it's a conference in America, big one, credentialing, licensure-based conference. Now, the submissions is 3rd of April, I think, for that one. So if you do want to speak at that particular conference, then it's worth looking at. And then what 2 other ones? I'm going to pick this one because it's an interesting one. I've not been to it. I might try and get along to it at some point, but it does clash with the next one. But Membership Excellence Conference, it's in November. And then, of course, you've got the FAB Conference in Milton Keynes this time, so they changed location. So let's get on to my conversation with Lisa. Now, what I want to do before I share this is I just want to give you a feel for the scale that we're talking about when Lisa. So have these pictures in your mind when Lisa's talking about it. So these are just some examples. So this is what they achieved. You know, delivering exams at this volume and this scale. You know, we're talking, you know, hundreds of candidates sat in spaces like Excel, taking examinations with little computers all lined up, all provided for, invigilators, technical support, everything in there. So put that in your mind and let's have this conversation with Lisa. So here's me in chat with Lisa. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you're well.
Yes, thank you, Tim. Yeah, very well. Hope you are too.
Excellent. And anyone who doesn't know about you, never met you, do you want to tell a bit more about yourself, your kind of background, your history, who you work for? Give us a full picture.
Yeah, cool. So I'm Lisa Greenslade. I have about 12 years of experience working in higher education over a number of universities. I've come up through the ranks in exams, ending my time at unis at King's College London as head of exams for 4.5 years. And now I work for the e-assessment management company, or TeamCo as they're known as. And I am helping other universities make the transition from paper-based exams to digital assessment. And so that's what I do now.
Brilliant. And like you say, you've kind of risen through the ranks, and I suppose you started off kind of new to them, green to the idea of delivering exams for high stakes things. Was it quite a new, certainly technology-based exams? Was it quite new to you at the time? Over that time, you've kind of learned all the skills, techniques, and knowledge on the way.
Yes, massively. So obviously, 12 years ago, digital exams were kind of very few and far between. So I've sort of started off very much in the paper-based realm. I did actually do some time working for an awarding body and was actually helping with the logistics and operations of national exams. And that was all paper-based. And as I came through the various different institutions that I worked for, we did certainly see digital assessment was talked about prior to the pandemic, but it wasn't necessarily something that people actually had hands-on experience with, and certainly not at scale. So I've been through that transition and kind of come out the other side of it now, I suppose. Certainly through my time at King's, for sure.
And it's been one of those topics where there's, because I remember when I first started in the kind of industry and we were kind of connecting with the universities, there was a server that served out a CD-ROM version of Question Marks platform or something like that. And there was a little room where 12 candidates could take an exam on computer or something. There were quite small spots, weren't they? And there was some leaders in the area that was kind of went forward with this, but it was the pandemic, I suppose, that kind of kicked it all off for you. So in terms of after the pandemic, then what's been your observation in terms of how higher education has changed their approach to examinations? Are some institutions doing it differently? What's been the kind of the result of the pandemic and the legacy, I suppose, from that?
So I think it'd be wrong to say that digital assessment wasn't on the agenda in higher education at all before the pandemic, because there were certainly institutions out there who were trying to champion this. So Brunel, for example, they were running in-person, bring your own device, those sorts of models as far back as 2016, 17, maybe. And I think everyone was sort of looking at that as perhaps that was the way forward and the only way to do things, because that was what was in front of us at the time. The pandemic then obviously happened, and that then forced digital assessment to the forefront of everybody's thinking and forced it upon us. And everyone approached it in different ways because it was a knee-jerk reaction to crisis, basically. And I think as we've returned back to sort of a more standard operating model post-pandemic. People are approaching it in different ways. We've got in-person assessment that's happening in a digital format that's in a controlled environment. We've got bring your own device models. We still do have institutions that are trying to retain digital assessment but still keep it remote where possible, because I think there's barriers to entry in terms of bringing it back into a controlled environment. And then there are some who've had to resort back to paper-based operations, because I think there's a sort of perceived gap in skills, perhaps kit and software and all those sorts of things, and it's a big investment for universities to start going down a completely different route for something that's so widespread across institutions. Exams and assessment touches every single faculty, department, those sorts of things. So it's a huge thing to consider doing, and I just think everyone's approaching it in different ways and perhaps wants to move forward in different ways, but they're not necessarily equipped with the knowledge, or perhaps just aren't sure how to approach it. I think that's a big barrier for it at the moment.
From what you're describing there, it's kind of flashing alarm bells or memories of there's a Monty Python sketch, the comedy group back in the 70s, where they had the race for people with no sense of direction. And they're all lined up on the line, and someone finds the gun and they all just off in different places. Yes. It kind of it makes me feel that's kind of thing going on. Not that they don't know where they're going, I suppose they have a direction, but it's just different from everyone else. And I suppose
and none of it is wrong. None of it is wrong. Nobody's approach is wrong. There's not a right or wrong approach to it. It's different for everybody. But yeah, it's like you say, it is very everyone's sort of, definitely.
And in terms of because this is something I always noticed about universities, certainly the UK, was that you've got a mix between faculty-led decisions and you've got institution-led decisions. Is it still the case that there's still that mix, or are the kind of central functions beginning to kind of have? Because I think for a good coordinated digital strategy or something like that, it needs to be centralized, doesn't it? Because otherwise, even within the institution, you've got people going off in different directions. What's the makeup at the moment? Is it still quite mixed?
Yes, and I think I think it always will be in that sense, because universities are structured very differently from one another, across the piece. And certainly the universities that I've worked in over the years, I've gone from very centralized models to decentralized models, and it's horses, courses for horses and all those sorts of things. So and I think that will always play a part in it. And it's not to say that a digital solution cannot be reached for those that are more kind of devolved out to faculties. I just think it might be perhaps a less efficient model to try and implement that in, but it's not impossible. But certainly as a more centrally led provision, it's easier to kind of scale something out across the piece, but it's harder to reach a decision on what the right route may be for that institution, because you're having to juggle with so many stakeholders and their needs and what their individual visions are for assessment. Because although you may have a centralized exams team or a centralized registry service or whatever, the faculties within that university will still have a vision for what they see for their assessments, and they still will work to a certain extent in silo, and that's natural. And so that's quite a challenge to sort of navigate through everybody's desires and what their own visions for their assessments, and to try and standardize that awful word that people don't like at universities, but to standardize things to kind of create a sort of a direction to head in.
I suppose that different platforms and different technologies have different features which will appeal to different faculties based on how they. So the mathematics and the physics and the English, they all have slightly different needs. It's almost a shame or an idea, really, in the way that why can't all the the mathematics departments come together and have a unified platform technology route? That would be more aligned. And in my head, I kind of, the way we're going with AI and SMEs and stuff, and ultimately that AI might actually create items. It'd be great if AI was creating a standardized set of items across a group of universities that are working together. Maybe I'm just being wild thinking there as to how they could work together. But so ultimately, someone's going to have to come to when you go through the digital transformation, someone's going to come forward with a business case or try and kind of pitch a business case for that process. Yeah. What would you say are the kind of key components of someone trying to get across that business case to say this is the route forward for us in terms of digital transformation? What must they be thinking about that?
So I actually think that universities or all institutions that are looking at assessment generally and review, because it's good practice to review your own practices and your procedures and policies and how you approach things. I think it's good practice to review those fairly regularly anyway, to make sure that you're not being left behind on curves and things with your sort of competitors in the sector. And I really do think there is huge benefit in performing a sort of cost analysis of what actually goes on currently in your institution. I think that there is a tendency for people to look at the cost of the exams being an exam hall, desks and chairs and some bits of paper. And actually it goes far beyond the physical in that sense, and actually what's happening in the process of creating your question banks or creating your papers, going through the scrutiny of those, producing them, then the actual exam takes place, and then the fun really begins then. Because then if we look at the old way of doing things as pen and paper, you've then got a physical script that is making its way around countless people. And there's so much risk associated with having a physical script that you can't replace as well. And so that's then bouncing around different people in faculties. It's all taking up time, resource, and you can't just generate more time. Once you've lost time, it's gone. And and everything we do at universities is so on the clock, and we've got a deadline for this, and we've told students that they're going to get the results on that date by hook or by crook. Then they have graduation, and so everything is so time pressured. And there is a real cost that comes after the exams in terms of what happens to that script. And I speak to universities regularly who say, oh yes, after we've done the marking, which takes X amount of people, X amount of weeks, we then archive it all by scanning all these individual scripts. That must cost a fortune. And so I think those, looking at current process is key to kind of identifying a real problem with existing delivery, because for a lot of institutions, they're looking at the pounds and pence, and they're looking at getting as much value for money out of a process as possible. And although the actual exam halls themselves might seem cheap, it's everything else that comes afterwards that actually is that person who's sifting through all of those physical scripts, is that the best use of their time, or are there other things the university could be paying them to do that presents more value to their department, their faculty, their students, whatever, that actually you could then digitalize that little slice of the pie that they're working on, and that becomes instantaneous, or near enough so. So I think that's a really good place to start, is kind of looking at what are we doing, why are we doing it this way, is there a better way to do it, and then start actually thinking about who your various stakeholders are within your institution and asking them what, and to get that information out of them, you need to ask them what their current process is. Don't ask them what should it be, ask them what are you doing once I hand you this script, once you've got it in the internal mail or it's been couriered to you or whatever you're doing from your exam halls, what actually happens to it. Tell me what you do with it. Don't tell me what you should be doing with it, because quite often those two things don't marry either, because we all know that the process maps that are drawn by the university or drawn by the heads of department or whatever, they rarely actually work in reality. Once you're sort of fighting fires here, there and everywhere, and we used to do it that way, but now we have to do it that way because of this, that and the other. So I think it's kind of going out to people and asking them to be honest about how they're currently managing assessment and how they're coping with all the activity that follows. Don't necessarily promise them anything. Don't go out and say, well, if you give me all this information, I'm going to come up with a fantastic opportunity or, a solution or whatever. But it forms the base for a kind of an operational problem that you then can go and explore your options and present that to someone and say, this is what's currently happening. The risks of this are, and the costs of it are. We can now go and have a look at our options. And so, once you've kind of assessed current position, you can have a look at whether it's bring your own device, whether it's having an online platform and you start to push things out a bit more remotely again, or whether you have a third party and come and help you with kit, electrics, whatever it is that you need help with, either off-site or on-site. And you weigh up the pros and cons of each and look at, talk to other universities, talk to other people who are going through the same process that you are, whatever stage they're at. There might be other people who are at the same sort of knowledge gathering stage who are still thinking of their options. There are other people who've decided on an option and have got so far through with it, and they'll be able to tell you, the challenges and the pitfalls that they might have come across while they're doing that. And there are massive success stories, King's being one of them, Brunel being another, but they've done them in very different ways. King's, we did in-person exams off-site at the Excel because of the volume, but they're now, last week they were running 1450 laptops all at one go for the med school. So
1400.
Yes.
1,400 laptops.
Huge scale. Yeah. So, and it is a huge success story, but equally, there are other universities who are also celebrating huge successes in doing different things, but achieving the same outcomes. And it's all about, I think, tapping into your network that is already established. There is a network of universities that you can tap into to talk to people. And there's people like me who, I'm here to offer insight and to have conversations with people who are looking at their options and assessing which one's best to go with, because it is a minefield, especially as the majority of people, although there tends to be a lot of movement in exams teams, but the majority of people who are in exams and enjoy being in exams stay in that realm for a long time. And like you said earlier, when I was sort of posed with the challenge, as it were, to digitalize our assessments, I honestly didn't know where to start, because it was something I'd done before, and I didn't have people in my sector at that time that I could reach out to and say, how have you, how can I do this at this scale? And it was really overwhelming and quite an intimidating thing to be sort of given and saying, oh, well, off you go, you're head of the exam, you're head of the exam service, you should know how to do this. Well, no one has done this before. I didn't really feel like I had someone that I could send an email to or pick up the phone and go, God, help! Like, how have you approached this? Because we were the first. So it can be quite daunting.
You're I suppose you're a consultant now, kind of in your own right, really, in this area, aren't you? And I know you're more than happy to have those conversations with people, and you've put together your thoughts. It's part of a white paper, haven't you, as part for TeamCo, capturing that down so people can have a look at that. And I'll put a link in there for everyone listening. And I suppose, so back to that kind of point about really you starting off with that question of how do I deliver these exams off-site? What kind of factors and challenges and what do you have to think about when thinking I'm going to go and deliver this mass exam off-site? Can you give us a kind of insight there? Is it just a question of find a venue, there's a plug in the corner, plug in, daisy wheel off the plugs, we'll be fine? Is it that easy, or is there more to know about the process?
I think I rather naively thought it was. Yes, it was. There were so many different challenges that I just didn't think there would be. So I was quite lucky in that I already had a venue sourced, because King's were already using the Excel as an off-site venue for paper-based exams because of the volume. There were very few venues that can host the numbers that we needed. And so we already had an agreement in place with Excel. And so I approached Excel and said, have you ever done anything like this before? I'm thinking of turning, one of your halls or two of your halls into a huge computer lab, basically. And they said, we haven't really done anything at that scale, but it doesn't mean it can't be achieved. And then, I was speaking to other stakeholders for those that, were supplying the power. And again, they were like, we've never done anything like this before. And so it really was a learning curve for everyone. And then there was where am I going to get these laptops from? Who has this amount of laptops? And to start off with, I honestly thought I was going to have to either lease directly from HP, Dell, or whatever, or was going to need to rent laptops from various sources because I needed so many. And it was actually someone at the Excel who pointed me in the direction of TeamCo. And that's how we came across them and started talking to them. And even for TeamCo at the time, it was a huge learning curve because although they had been delivering high stakes assessment for a little while by that point, it was nothing at the scale that I was asking them to. And so it was very much everyone banding together. And I would absolutely suggest to anybody that was looking at doing this, please lean into professionals and lean into the people that have the experience, because it's so out of what the norm is or has been for such a long time for heads of service of exams or exams managers, assessment managers, whatever your title might be, but anyone who's had responsibility for in-person written exams. No one really expects you to have the skills and the knowledge to then bring this together. I didn't know anything about Wi-Fi. I just knew that I had a in the corner that blinks at me and somehow I can access the internet. I don't know anything about electrics and what you can and can't safely run off of different, it was so beyond my skill set, my knowledge and my expertise that I had to just lean upon everybody else and trust that I had good people in the room to support me. And, and that was also within my own team at King's as well, that, it really was a group effort. And yeah, I had to really, really lean upon other people's prior knowledge and experience and kind of trust the process. And it didn't, it wasn't always plain sailing. There were a few bumps in the road and we came across some teething problems along the way, like you do with anything when it's the first time that you're doing it and implementing something at that scale. Because although we started off with 450 or 500 the first time we ran, I think the first pilot we did, the second time round it was right, we have to go full scale with this because we're getting pressure from external regulators, we have to up the numbers, and it was 1200. It literally went from 450 to 1200. And yeah, it didn't feel like we had time to breathe. We just had to do it and just go with it. But yeah, so it was challenging, but it was fun.
It sounds like an exciting journey, isn't it? Would you say?
Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, or it is. And we're taking on new clients and we're going through that same process with them, and it's really exciting. It's really nice to see that prospective client comes to you with a vision of how they'd like things to work or problem that they're struggling with, and you're able to provide a solution for them that we can help them work through, because everyone has different requirements. There's always something that's slightly different in the mix that we sort of have to sort of learn to adapt to, and it's never ending really in terms of how it progresses and what the different things that pop up from universities approaching things different ways. It's really interesting. I think it is.
So to close then, do you see a kind of continuing trend then of universities using these kind of large venue approaches? Is that something that's still very much going to be part of that option?
I think there'll be a mix. I think that for those that have no choice to do external venues because of scale, then yeah, absolutely they'll continue with that. But we are definitely seeing a trend in universities wanting to use their own estates, their own campus estate, which works very well with the model that, you know, we run at TeamCo, because we specialise in pop-up exam centres. So, you know, we very much sneak in with all of our stuff, set everything up for you, your exams run, and then we disappear, and it's like we were never there. And we're able to transform all sorts of different spaces. You know, we use sports halls, we use football stadiums, we use the Excel, we use stuff on, you know, teaching space that we change into. I think we've even used a drama studio, or certainly looked at drama studios for use. And, you know, and we'll come on site and we'll, you know, if you say we'd like you to look at these spaces for suitability, we'll come on site and, you know, do a visit and discuss with you what the various options are and say, you can use this, but there might be these problems. This space is a little bit more suitable. Those sorts of things. You know, it's a two-way conversation from start to finish about, you know, how we can make it best work for what clients' needs are. I think I do think there will be a general shift still towards that kind of delivery, but as with everything, people will approach it slightly differently.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, for the people listening and watching, it's worth checking out the TeamCo website, because there's some amazing photos on there of the exams on laptops and things, and something I've witnessed myself as well. It is an incredible site. So worth looking at. Well, thank you very much, Lisa. That's fantastic. I think, you know, obviously I'll share your LinkedIn contact so people can get in touch and ask you some further questions about that process. You'd be happy to receive those, wouldn't you? So
absolutely. Thank you.
But thank you very much for your time today, and speak to you soon. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tim. See you later.
Thanks for that, Lisa. That was excellent. I think I want to show them again, because I tried to show them then during when the recording was playing, but obviously cut into the audio. But, you know, just the sheer size and scape of this kind of setup, and the fact the team, it's like, you know, special air service kind of territory of, you know, descend in, set up, and they're out, and you wouldn't even know they've been there, kind of thing. So fair play to the guys at TeamCo for some excellent work there. So that's it for this mini series. We'll be back to the kind of usual program shows, lots of interviews still to come this year. We've just gone through that kind of 1 year landmark, which was fantastic. Thank you for everyone that's been a supporter so far. Thank you for watching, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you, and bye-bye.